A hard slap cracked across Derek Lawson's face, his coffee spilling, as two cops shoved him against the hood, treating him like a criminal for nothing more than the color of his skin. The crowd gasped, phones raised, capturing every second of the humiliation. But what happens when these same officers discover the man they struck is not just any passerby, but their own boss, the deputy commissioner, with the power to end their careers in an instant? If this moment shocks you, tap like and share to spread the story, because what follows will leave you breathless. I don't wear the suit on Fridays. I pull on a gray hoodie lace, up old leather shoes that remember more sidewalks than boardrooms, and I walk. That's not a metaphor. It's how I keep myself honest. Policy sounds different when it has to cross a street. My name is Derek Lawson. On paper, I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Standards and Accountability at the Rivergate Police Department, the person who reads the complaints, audits the body cams, decides whether an incident is a training moment or a career-ending choice. Off paper, I'm a middle-aged black man who likes strong coffee and the feeling of morning air working its way into tired lungs. The title lives upstairs. The man lives on the block. Rivergate wakes up like an old friend, slow, creaky, stubborn about routine. Newspapers thump onto stoops. A bus exhales and kneels for a woman with a tote bag. A jogger ghosts past eyes forward already on lunch. I cut down Maple toward Rosa's Corner, the kind of bodega a city pretends it doesn't need until a storm takes the lights out and everyone remembers who kept batteries behind the counter. Rosa Alvarez runs the place like a conductor. She's 5'0" with shoulders that don't ask permission. "Mornin', mister." "Lawson," she calls as the bell over the door does its thin little ring. "You still on that no sugar kick, trying to live long enough to be annoying," I tell her. "How's the application going?" That means her grandson. "He's bright enough to swallow a scholarship whole, but the forms talk in riddles." Rosa pours coffee the way surgeons stitch steady sure. "We got the essay done," she says. "He wrote about building a robot out of a broken fan and a cereal box. You would have loved it. I already do." I slide a few dollars across and she sneaks a banana into the bag like kindness is contraband. The store smells like warm bread magazine ink and something citrus that hangs on your clothes just long enough to make commuters look up. Two teens argue near the fridge about which sports drink tastes less like regret. A man in a reflective vest scratches a lottery ticket against his thigh with the care of a jeweler. You don't need a spreadsheet to learn a city. You need 5 minutes where no one thinks they're being watched. "Mr. Lawson," a voice says near my elbow. A boy with a backpack, hair picked high with the confidence of 14. "Jamal." I've seen him around always with a scooter and a question. Today he has both. "Which one's better?" he asks, holding up two magazines. A glossy Science Monthly with a telescope on the cover. A cheaper title full of explosions and fonts that shout. "Telescope," I say, and point my chin. "The other one's going to tell you what to think. This might teach you how to change your mind." He grins like he's been let in on a trick. When he thinks I'm not looking, he slides his phone out and tilts it low. Not a selfie, just a moment. I'm not mad. Kids archive the world because adults keep losing it. Back on the sidewalk, the day feels clean. Sunlight balances on the edges of things. A delivery truck argues with a loading zone and loses. I cradle the coffee, breathe the kind of breath that doesn't ask permission from anyone. This is the part where I tell you why I do it. Why I leave the office and its bullet points to count steps on a street that doesn't always love me back. When I was 19, an officer put my face on the hood of a car that didn't belong to me because my skin did. "Hands behind your back. Don't move." I said my name like it could help. It didn't. My mother stood there with a dish towel still in her hand. My father kept saying "sir" to a boy who was 3 months older than me. The cuffs went on easy and came off without an apology. The medal left a lesson. Sometimes the safest place to tell the truth is inside a system that thinks it owns it. I have been trying to turn that lesson into policy ever since. People hear deputy commissioner and assume marble and ceremony. They don't picture a man scanning price tags because Rosa's grandkid deserves a tip jar in his favor. They don't picture a walk that lives between dignity and something meaner that waits for a reason. I picture both. That's why I walk. "Tell him about the rec center," Rosa says behind me as I push the door. "He's collecting volunteers." She means me, of course. She means everyone. I take 2 steps into the day and the air changes. It's subtle, like a room when someone you owe money to walks in. A new sound threads the old ones, sirens far at first, then closer, then close enough to borrow breath. The usual impatience doesn't come with it. No one rolls their eyes, instead shoulders tighten. The bus driver puts a hand on the brake he's already using. Even the teens go quiet. We've all been in rooms where laughter stops because someone's father cleared his throat. This feels like that. I sip the coffee and look up Maple. The sirens bend around the corner as if the street is a straw. My head does what it always does, in uniform, and outchecks, categorizes, asks questions before anyone else thinks to. Is there a call on the dispatcher log for this block? I didn't hear the code. Is there a bolo that paints half the city with one brush? I scan for what they might be hunting and see only what I always see: people on their way to the version of themselves they can afford. Jamal drifts back into my peripheral phone in his palm like a moth. You good, Mr. Lawson? He says, voice lower than his age. I'm always good until I'm not, I tell him, and I smile so he doesn't have to be brave for both of us. If you've never felt a city hold its breath, you might miss it. The traffic light turns, but the cars don't. Rosa's bell jangles again without the door moving. Far off, a dog chooses not to bark. I have sat in rooms where policy got negotiated like a hostage. I have also stood on corners where it arrived as a stranger, no one invited. The sirens are that stranger now, close enough to rattle the ice in a cup I'm not holding. I shift the bag in my hand. The banana peeks out like a smile. I think about the robot essay. I think about my mother's dish towel. I think about every officer I've disciplined who told me the streets demand a posture you can't understand from behind glass. I think about the ones who said, thank you, after I wrote them up because lines are easier to walk when someone finally paints them. The sound swells, then cuts. That's how you know you're the destination. Somewhere to my left, rubber skids and grips again. The bus driver sets the brake a notch deeper. One of the teens whispers a word he shouldn't know yet. I don't turn my back to the noise. I don't raise my hands. I do what I always do. I stand where I am and make room for the truth to show itself. If you expect a genius speech here, you'll be disappointed. That's not how mornings work. Mornings don't care about your script. They care about whether you've practiced enough to tell the story without the lines. I have. I've told it in rooms that smelled like printer toner and in rooms that smelled like bleach. I'm about to tell it again, not with a microphone, but with a cup of hoodie in a street that knows my name. Behind me, Rosa says my name in Spanish, the way only she does, soft on the second syllable. Ahead of me, the blue of a light bar spills down Maple and breaks into shapes on the sidewalk. Jamal's camera rises a fraction. My pulse finds a drum beat it learned a long time ago. You can convince yourself a city is gentle if you only walk it at noon. You can convince yourself a system is fair if you only read the memos it writes about itself. I don't have that luxury. I have a job, a history, and a banana sticking out of a brown paper bag. I have the memory of metal on bone and the promise I made to a boy I used to be. I have a morning that's done being quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackles a code I know better than my own birthday. Somewhere closer, a tire kisses the curb hard enough to disagree. The air tilts. You can feel an encounter arrive before it begins, like weather you can't see yet. This is the part where some stories add foreshadowing. I don't need it. The street will do the work. I set the coffee on the metal trash can beside the bus stop so my hands are visible without pretending to surrender. My shoulders drop a half inch. I don't rehearse a single sentence. The truth doesn't need lines. It needs witnesses. That's when the car swings into view. The cruiser came in hot, nose down, tail light twitching like it was angry on its own. Tires kissed the curb hard enough to startle a pigeon into the air. Conversations paused mid-syllable. You could feel a ripple move through the block. Rosa's hand froze on the register. The bus driver leaned forward on the wheel. Jamal slid 2 steps closer without meaning to. Doors flew open. 2 uniforms spilled out like they'd rehearsed it, the older one. First wide in the shoulders, chin set to permanent verdict. The younger one a half beat behind, reading the older man's body like it was a manual. I didn't know their names yet, but the block would learn them faster than it learns the weather. Officer Cole Maddox and Officer Ryan Keller. Cole didn't walk so much as declare space. He planted himself in front of me with a look I've seen in mirrors that don't belong to me, men who have decided what the world is before the world has a chance to speak. Hands where I can see 'em, he barked. They were already there, one around a paper cup, the other open at my side. I didn't raise them high like a headline, just enough to make the intention obvious. "What's going on, officer?" I asked, voice level. Not polite enough to be meek, not sharp enough to be a dare. Ryan's hand hovered near his taser like nerves had taught it a dance. He couldn't have been more than 25. The brim of his cap was still stiff with newness. His eyes bounced from my hoodie to my face, and away again, the way a kid looks at a stove he's been told not to touch. "You match a description," Cole said, scanning my chest like my heart was some contraband he could seize. He was older than me by a few hard years, or younger than me by a few bad choices. The kind of man who thinks command is what happens when volume wins. "What description is that?" I kept my tone neutral. "Be specific." Cole's mouth stretched into something that wanted to be a smile but forgot how. "I just gave it," he said. "Hands up." Around us, the block tuned itself to listening. A man in a reflective vest took out his earbud and didn't pretend he wasn't watching. The teens with scooters found stillness they didn't ordinarily traffic in. I could feel Rosa at my back, the door chime, almost ringing out of habit. I glanced once at Jamal and then passed him away to say, "Don't be a hero, but don't blink either." "Look," I said to Cole, "if there was a call, if there's a bolo with a case number, don't tell me how to do my job." He took a step closer. I could smell mint over coffee and the thin wisp of gun oil. "Hands up now." He wasn't asking for compliance. He was asking for the performance of it. "You want my ID?" I asked. "We can settle this in 30 seconds. "You match a description," he repeated, as if the phrase were a key that could open any lock. "Black male, gray hoodie." He made the words sound like a crime. There are 100 things I could have said. There are 1,000 ways to say none of them. I chose the one that left the most air in the room. "And how tall?" I asked. "What shoes? What time? What direction of travel? What the slap landed like punctuation?" It wasn't wild. It was practiced. Palm to cheek, a snap of the wrist, the kind of hit that says more about the hitter than the target. My head turned and snapped back on its own. The coffee jerked in my hand and I felt the heat before the sting, a ribbon of brown running down my hoodie like a sudden clumsy sash. Someone on the sidewalk gasped. Someone else said, "Hey," in a voice that didn't know what it planned to do next. The bus driver's hand came off the wheel. Jamal's camera jumped, then steadied the way courage does. Before I could wipe my face, Cole's other hand shot out and wrenched the cup. He crushed it midair and flung the remains into my chest, a cheap baptism in caffeine. "Hands where I can see 'em," he said again. But what he meant was, I decide the weather. I did not move toward him. I did not move away. I let the coffee find the seams it wanted. "You don't have probable cause for a detention," I said, "because truth spoken plainly has a weight to it even when no one wants to hold it. You've made contact without articulable suspicion. It's all being documented." Ryan offered a half-size voice behind Cole, trying to sound official and landing somewhere near apology. "Good," I said, and I shifted my stance half an inch so the body cam saw my face clean. Cole's hand slid from my chest to my shoulder. The shove wasn't a full-body throw. It was meaner than that. He pushed just enough to turn me, and then used the momentum to plant me against the hood. The metal was warm the way a warning is warm. My hands went wide, fingers spread so there could be no argument later. "Stop resisting," he said, and it came out like something he said often, muscle memory, more than observation. "I'm not resisting," I said into the hood. The engine ticked, that cooling sound engines make when they've been asked to do more than they planned. "You need to slow down." Behind me, Rosa's voice cut through like a whistle. "He shops here every week. Don't you dare," a door hinge complained. Feet scuffed. The street made room for a line no one could see, but everyone understood. "Ma'am, back up," Ryan said, trying to braid authority with respect and tying a knot in neither. His eyes flicked to her phone, then to Jamal's. He swallowed. I heard it. Search Cole told him already at my pockets. He did it like he was patting a couch for the remote. Not careful, not curious, just ownership performed with hands. From the inside pocket, Ryan pulled a small leather case. He weighed it in his palm and looked at the zipper. A question crossed his face. Then it left. He let the case drop. It hit the curb with a noise only I seemed to hear. "That's mine," I said without raising my head. Cole pressed my temple to the hood like he wanted to leave a print. "You don't talk," he said. "You listen." The coffee at my collar cooled into stickiness. You have the man in the reflective vest started, then chose the rest of his sentence carefully, the way a man chooses where to stand during lightning. He didn't finish. Hands behind your back, Cole said. Like the scene required new dialogue, I moved them where he told me not because I agreed, but because the story needed witnesses more than it needed me to win a small argument in a large moment. The cuffs came out with their familiar song, a click that every city learns to hear before it knows the alphabet. First wrist, then the other a tug that found an old ache and reminded it of its name. You're making a mistake, I said, and I kept my voice even because panic makes the wrong people brave. You can still stop, funny Cole said. That's what guys like you always say. What guys is that, I asked. Don't push it, he said, and he didn't answer because the answer would have had to be true. Ryan hovered near my shoulder like a shadow he didn't want to claim. Up close, I could see the freckles under the uniform. I could see the way his jaw clenched when he looked at the case on the curb. He wanted to ask. He wanted not to. He chose the second want. Phones were up everywhere now, Rosa's steady and angry, the teens jittery, but determined the bus drivers somehow exactly level. A chorus of glass eyes whispering we saw. I felt the line of the scene tighten the way a rope does before a pull. Officer, I said to Cole, if you have a radio call, cite it. If you have a case number, say it. He laughed. It wasn't joy, it was ownership. The only number you need is the one on your booking form. You're escalating a consensual contact into a detention without cause, I said, and I knew how it sounded like a man auditioning for a lecture. But I wasn't talking to him. Not really. I was talking to the record. He leaned down so his breath fogged a tiny oval on the paint. You're not in charge here, he said softly in that voice men use when they want to be the only person in the room who understands the rules. Not yet, I said, and let the words go where they needed to. A second cruiser turned onto Maple. Sirens died as it rolled to a stoplights, still painting the windows blue. Somewhere behind me, the bell over Rosa's door rang itself silly. Jamal moved to my left to keep the shot clear. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Cole tightened the cuffs a notch that didn't need tightening and straightened like a man who expected applause. You're under investigation, he announced to the block, as if the phrase meant anything, as if it were a law he could hide behind. For what, I asked. For what I say, he answered, and there it was, the description finally specific. The hood was warm. My cheek cooled where the coffee had already dried. The street held its breath. And I did what I came out here to do. I let the truth keep walking, even when someone tried to stop it. Ryan's hands shook as he dug into Derek's inner pocket. Out came a small leather badge case worn at the edges, the kind that could silence an entire room if open. But Ryan didn't unzip it. He didn't even glance at the seal pressed into the leather. Instead, he tossed it to the curb like it was nothing more than trash. The dull thud against concrete wasn't loud, but in that tight silence, it rang like a bell everyone felt in their bones. Cole's voice broke the moment. Stop resisting, he barked, though Derek stood perfectly still, palms flat on the hood, back rigid, every muscle holding the line of composure. The hood was still hot from the engine, its warmth bleeding into Derek's chest and arms until it felt like the steel itself was trying to brand him. His wrists jerked together, cold metal clamping down the ratcheting click of the cuffs, cutting through the block like gunfire. Each notch felt like a verdict, not of guilt, but of humiliation. Phones in every direction captured the sound, and it became the kind of noise no one forgets. Around them, the street was no longer ordinary. Neighbors stood frozen in doorways. A man on a ladder leaned down, hammer in hand, staring. A group of teens gripped their scooters like spears. Even the bus driver had killed the engine, the silence of that heavy machine, underscoring just how wrong this scene had become. From behind, Rosa's voice cracked the air like lightning. He's a customer. Every week, she shouted, phone lifted high. You don't have the right to do this. Cole snapped his head toward her eyes sharp, a predator cornered. Put it down, lady, unless you want to join him in cuffs. But Rosa Alvarez had survived more than men like him. Her hand was steady, her jaw tight. The whole block will see this. She shot back her camera, unwavering. Try me. Jamal, half hidden at her side, whispered fiercely, I'll live stream it. The whole city will know. His fingers trembled on the screen, but his voice carried something harder than fear. It carried defiance. Derek's cheek pressed against the warm, metal sweat mixing with the sting of spilled coffee cooling into stickiness on his hoodie. And in that instant, he wasn't just in Rivergate anymore. Memory dragged him backward, back to when he was 16, dragged from his parents' porch by officers who said he matched a suspect wrist, cuffed as his mother begged them to stop. Back to the humiliation that had never left him, the scar that pushed him to rise through this very system to try and reform it from the inside. Now, decades later, the same steel bit into his skin. History had circled back, cruel and deliberate. He swallowed the ache and spoke, his voice steady, controlled. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, each word clear enough for every phone microphone on the block to catch. Cole leaned closer, smirk curling. "The only mistake here," he sneered, "is thinking you matter." His voice dripped with contempt, the kind that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with race. A murmur spread through the bystanders, sharp breaths pulled in, as though the insult had struck them too. A woman covered her child's ears. The teenagers with scooters exchanged wide-eyed looks, anger sparking in their faces. The cruelty of those 4 words had landed hard in public. The cuffs locked tighter with a final metallic snap. Shh. That single sound echoed across the block. People flinched as if the steel had clamped around their own wrists. Phones zoomed closer. A hush fell heavy and suffocating as everyone realized they were witnessing something irreversible. The dignity of a man stripped bare in broad daylight for no reason at all. Rosa's voice rang out again, louder now, righteous fury in every syllable. "You're going to regret this. He's not some thug off the street. You're breaking the law." Cole turned just enough to let his grin face the crowd. "Lady, you keep talking, and I'll find a cell for you, too." But Rosa did not back down. "Do it," she dared, her voice quivering but unbroken. "Do it so the whole world can see what you are." Ryan stood a half step back, his freckled face, pale eyes darting between Derek, pinned against the hood, and the leather case lying abandoned on the curb. He knew. Something in him already knew. But fear of Cole's shadow kept him still silent, complicit. Derek felt the hot steel press deeper into his wrists as Cole yanked the chain once more, unnecessarily rough. "Stop moving," Cole barked again for the cameras, for the record he wanted to write. "I'm not moving," Derek replied, calm but cutting, "and the cameras will prove it." The crowd's murmur grew into something heavier, anger laced with anticipation, like a storm gathering. Phones tilted higher, faces leaned forward, every witness unwilling to look away. Inside his chest, Derek's heart drummed steady, not from fear, but from resolve. He knew exactly what was unfolding. He knew this was bigger than his humiliation. This was evidence, a record, and soon it would turn. The cuffs had spoken, the crowd had seen, and the officers, whether they realized it or not, had just crossed a line they could never erase. Another cruiser rolled up fast, but without sirens, its tires whispering to a stop instead of screaming. Doors stayed shut for a beat, like the street itself was holding its breath. Then she stepped out. Sergeant Elena Morales, sharp uniform, dark braid, tucked tight eyes, scanning with the steadiness of someone who had seen more than most and refused to look away. Morales wasn't just another name on the roster. People in Rivergate knew her. She was the one who returned calls when others ignored them, who walked beats when no one was watching. Integrity had her fingerprints, which is why when she took in the scene, the man cuffed against the hood, the phones raised the leather case on the curb, her jaw ticked in a way only a few caught. She approached without hurry, each step deliberate, as if buying the crowd time to watch her process what they already knew something was wrong here. "Reason for the arrest?" she asked flatly, eyes fixed on Cole. Cole straightened, puffing his chest like he'd been waiting for an audience. "Resisting. Aggressive behavior. Suspicious of criminal activity." He rattled off the charges the way a school kid recites multiplication tables, rehearsed but hollow. The crowd reacted before Morales did. A wave of muttering, sharp and angry, swept down the block. Everyone had seen. Everyone had heard. No one had witnessed resistance, no aggression beyond Cole's own. Rosa raised her voice over the noise, her phone aimed steady as a scope. "That's a lie. We all saw what you did." Morales' eyes slid past Cole, past Ryan's pale face, and landed on Derek. He wasn't begging, wasn't shouting, wasn't playing victim. He stood against the hood's shoulders, squared as much as the cuffs allowed, dignity bleeding through every breath. His voice carried low but clear. In that case, Sergeant, there's something in the box on the ground you might want to see. Morales' gaze flicked to the small leather case lying forgotten on the curb. She bent, picked it up, and with a quick glance at Derek for permission, unzipped it. The moment her eyes fell on the badge, the slightest crack crossed her composure. Not fear, not panic, recognition. Deputy Commissioner. For half a second, the air between her and Derek thickened with understanding. She closed the case carefully, like handling live current, and slid it into her vest pocket. Her voice, when it returned, was sharper steel wrapped in calm. "Uncuff him," she ordered. Ryan shifted his weight like he might obey, but Cole laughed a dry, mocking bark. "With respect, Sergeant, you don't know what you're asking." Morales didn't flinch. That wasn't a request, Officer Maddox. That was an order. Cole's hand tightened on the cuffs, his smirk carved deeper. This man fits the suspect's description. Blackmail? Hoodie? Same story we've been running down all week. His tone dripped with a confidence born of years getting away with this. The block simmered. Phones caught every word. Rosa shouted, "He's not resisting. You're lying to her face." Jamal's live stream numbers ticked higher on his screen. Derek lifted his chin slightly, his voice steady. "Leave them on." The words cut through the tension sharper than any blade. Everyone froze, even Morales. "Sir," she asked, disbelief softening the steel in her tone. "I said leave them on." Derek's eyes swept the crowd, then locked back on hers. "I want this recorded exactly as it is. Every second, every word, every lie. If those cuffs come off now, they'll rewrite what happened. They'll say it was nothing." For the first time, Cole's smirk faltered. He glanced at the cameras, then back at Derek, suddenly unsure if the trap had sprung on him instead. The block fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it might split concrete, and then slowly people began to nod. Rosa, the teens with scooters, even the man on the ladder. They understood. Derek was choosing humiliation, not because he was weak, but because truth mattered more than pride. Morales' eyes held his for a long moment. She understood too. She slipped the badge deeper into her vest and gave a single nod. "As you wish," she said quietly, but the words carried. Then turning to Cole and Ryan, she added, "Escort him in, and treat him like a human being while you still can." Ryan's Adam's apple bobbed hard. He moved toward Derek with something close to caution, as though finally realizing who stood before him. Cole still wore that brittle smirk, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. As the officers led Derek toward the back seat of the cruiser, Morales fell into step just behind. She wasn't going to stop what was happening, not yet, but she also wasn't going to let Cole own the narrative. Every detail mattered now, every frame, every witness. And in the eyes of the crowd and the steady hands holding phones aloft, the truth was already writing itself. The cuffs bit into Derek's wrists as Cole shoved him into the back of the cruiser, the door slamming shut with a hollow thud that carried across the block. To anyone watching, it was the sound of a verdict already passed. Phones followed every second, lenses, tilting voices calling out. "We've got it on camera," someone shouted. "Everything we saw it all," another added. The crowd's outrage didn't save him from the back seat, but it promised something Cole hadn't planned for witnesses, and too many of them. The car jerked into motion, tires screeching against the curb. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of sweat and vinyl. The partition window ahead was scratched and clouded, the kind that turned every face on the other side into a blur. Derek angled himself sideways, the cuffs pulling awkwardly against his spine. He didn't fight. He didn't flinch. He just settled calm in a way that rattled the ones in front. Ryan sat stiff in the passenger seat, his hands too tight on his lap. He stole glances into the rearview mirror, trying not to, but failing every time. Derek's gaze met his in that rectangle of glass, steady, unblinking. No fury, no panic, just something unreadable. It made Ryan shift as if his own reflection had betrayed him. Cole drove like the steering wheel owed him money knuckles, white eyes fixed forward. The streets blurred past in jerks of acceleration, stop signs barely slowing him down. The anger in his jaw never softened, not even when he finally spoke. "We'll write it clean," Cole muttered low, but sharp words meant only for Ryan. Resisting, aggressive stance, suspicious movements. "You back me up. Don't miss a word." Ryan swallowed, throat dry. "Yeah," he said, but it came out cracked, more question than answer. Cole glanced sideways. You hear me? You sign it. Witness line. Simple. We've done this before. The words hung heavy in the cramped car, each one pressing against Ryan's ribs like a weight. He knew what it meant. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about every report he'd ever signed, without thinking every shortcut justified by Cole's authority. And now, staring into the mirror, he saw Derek's calm eyes waiting for him to blink. Derek finally spoke, his voice soft enough that Ryan almost thought he imagined it. Officer Keller, he said, tone even deliberate. Your body cam. It's been time-stamped wrong for weeks. Fix it before someone else notices. Ryan's head snapped, eyes wide in the mirror. He hadn't told anyone about the glitch. Not Cole. Not even Morales. He had planned to ignore it, let it slide like so many other details in this job. But Derek knew. How Ryan started, but the words caught in his throat. Cole slammed his palm against the steering wheel. Don't talk to him, he barked. He's a suspect, not your friend. Derek leaned back against the seat, the cuffs tight behind him, his voice still calm. You think you can bury this with a few lines in a report? You think the world outside that precinct doesn't see? Truth doesn't live in paperwork, gentlemen. It lives in the people you ignored. Ryan's stomach nodded. The live stream. Rosa's voice. Jamal's trembling hands holding the phone. The crowd. All of them recording. All of them watching. Cole didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence was its own threat. Outside, the city rolled past. Storefronts blurred into streetlights, the hum of the engine steady, almost mocking. And then, in the side mirror, a pair of headlights appeared. Close, steady, unwavering. Morales. Her cruiser trailed them at a perfect distance, not crowding, not drifting. Just there. Watching. Guarding. The message was clear: she wasn't letting Cole own this ride. Not tonight. Inside, the silence thickened. Ryan's hands fidgeted in his lap, his chest rising too fast. He wanted to believe Cole's voice, to believe the promise of a clean report. But the calm in Derek's eyes, the way he sat cuffed and still, as if he were in control, made belief feel like a lie. Cole finally leaned closer to Ryan, voice low, teeth gritted. He's no one. Just another mouth running. Don't let him get in your head. You sign, you're clear. That's how this works. But Ryan wasn't sure anymore. The man in the back seat wasn't panicking, wasn't begging. He was sitting in silence, chained, but unbroken, like he knew something no one else did. Like he was waiting for them to make their mistake permanent. The city lights flickered across Derek's face through the window bars, each flash carving the calm deeper into his features. He hadn't asked for release. He hadn't begged for justice in that moment. He had chosen the cuffs, chosen the humiliation, and Ryan couldn't figure out why. And that was the most unsettling part of all. The ride dragged on, every second sharper than the last. The crowd's shouts still rang in Ryan's ears. Morales' headlights stayed firm in the mirror, and Derek's silence hung heavier than any scream. He wasn't just a man being taken to a precinct. He was something else, something larger. And in that cramped cruiser, it was no longer clear who was really in control. Precinct 4 wore its fatigue on the walls, scuffed paint plastic chairs with the tired slump of mid-level bureaucracy. The intake desk was a perimeter of manila folders and coffee rings. Cole marched Derek through like he was delivering proof of a theory. Ryan followed a half step behind, eyes fixed on the floor tiles, as if each one might break under his weight. Morales came last, silent and watchful, her presence the only neat thing in the room. Lieutenant Frank Duran emerged from a side office, straightening a tie that had given up years ago. He had the look of a man who believed in forms more than people. Rivergate knew him as the lieutenant who returned emails when a camera was involved and ignored the ones that warned about a problem officer before a camera ever rolled. Cole had benefited from that kind of forgetfulness. What's the charge? Duran asked, boredom already loaded in the question. Cole didn't hesitate. Resisting interference, suspicious activity, he recited like a catechism he'd said 100 times. Aggressive posture during lawfully initiated stop. Duran nodded as though the boxes had already been checked. Book him, he said, turning back toward the door. Morales moved then, not fast, just exactly on time. Lieutenant, she said, level. You should look at what was in his pocket. Duran's mouth flattened into a practiced smirk. Sergeant, everybody carries something that looks official these days. He held out his hand without interest. Let's not dramatize. Morales didn't blink. She placed the small leather case in his palm. The room kept breathing, but it got quieter about it. Duran unzipped it with a sigh, meant to say this would be nothing. The badge inside caught the fluorescent light and threw it back at him. His face paled a shade that didn't match his posture. The smirk slid off like a sticker in the rain. He read the name twice, then once more to be sure the letters wouldn't rearrange Derek Lawson, Deputy Commissioner Standards and Accountability. A beat passed where no one spoke. Paper seemed louder. The HVAC coughed. Somewhere down the hall, a printer unfurled a page like a white flag. Duran's voice returned a size too small. Uncuff him, he said, and then corrected himself louder, older. Uncuff him, now. This is Deputy Commissioner Lawson. The room stopped, pretending it was ordinary. A clerk's pen froze mid-scratch. The civilians waiting on a bench leaned forward as if pulled by string. The word deputy rang in the air long after Commissioner hit the floor. Ryan's hands went to the cuffs. He fumbled the key, then found the whole breath, shallow jaw tight. The metal released with a click that sounded like disbelief learning English. He stepped back, swallowing hard as if guilt had a taste. Cole didn't move. You're joking, he said to no one and everyone. Then to Duran, louder, Lieutenant, with respect, he matched the description. Black male. Hoodie. We had cause. Duran didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Derek the way a man looks at a painting he's sure is a forgery until the curator tells him it isn't. Deputy Commissioner Lawson, he said, trying on respect like a new suit. Had I known you didn't, Derek said, calm as a held door. He rubbed his wrist once, not theatrical, just human. That's the point. Cole's face pinched into something brittle. He was non-compliant, he insisted. Hostile tone, refused commands. Morales' voice cut clean. I was on scene, Lieutenant. There was no probable cause articulated. There was force used before any lawful basis was established. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Duran cleared his throat, a bureaucrat rearranging himself inside the moment. Officer Maddox, Officer Keller, he said you will secure your body cams and dash footage immediately. Sergeant Morales will take custody. Cole stared at Derek like the ground had shifted and refused to warn him. This is political, he spat quieter than he meant to. It's procedural, Derek replied, and overdue. A silence opened that wasn't empty. It was crowded with everything that had just inverted. The man in the hoodie was now the man who signed evaluations, approved promotions, initiated terminations. The room felt it. Faces adjusted, shoulders recalibrated. Even the fluorescent light seemed to hum at a different pitch. Duran finally found something solid to stand on the manual. Per policy, he said, to cover the stutter, we'll move to an interview room. Deputy Commissioner, sir, we'll get statements. Of course. Derek didn't look at the interview rooms. He looked at the evidence bins, the upload station, the clock on the wall that had been 3 minutes fast for a month. You'll get the truth, he said. Start with securing the record. Morales nodded once, already moving. I'll supervise the transfer, she said. She took the badge case back, not as trophy, but as boundary. This happened, and we will not pretend otherwise. Ryan stood near the desk, eyes on his hands like they were strangers he'd just met. He looked up at Derek, then, away, shame, fear, something else trying to breathe. Cole broke the moment with a laugh that failed to be a laugh. Unbelievable, he said under it, more to himself than the room. All this because a guy in a hoodie wanted to make a scene. Derek met his eyes. No, he said. All this because an officer did. The intake room absorbed that line and held it. In the hallway, the printer stopped. The precinct seemed for a breath to listen to itself. Interview room 3, Duran said, retreating into procedure like a foxhole. Now, they moved. Not as before. Not with the certainty that had dragged Derek in. The geometry had changed. Morales walked at Derek's shoulder. Ryan trailed quiet every step in argument with his own reflection. Cole followed with fists that didn't know whether to clench. The door to room 3 swung open, the hinge, sighing like it had watched this play too many times. Inside a table waited a camera. Waited policy, waited. So did the reckoning the street had already begun. The interview room hummed with fluorescent light, a steady buzz like nerves refusing to quiet down. The table between them wasn't just furniture anymore. It was a fault line. On one side sat Derek, wrists still marked red from the cuffs. Across from him, Cole hunched forward with a pen, already tapping the report sheet, jaw locked tight. Ryan lingered beside him, shoulders tight, pen hovering like a man about to sign his own sentence. Morales stood near the evidence locker, arms crossed, gaze sharp enough to cut paper. Derek's voice was calm, but it filled the room with weight. Before we proceed, I'm ordering every piece of footage to be sealed. Body cams, dash cams, intake room video. Nothing gets erased, nothing gets altered. Cole barked a laugh, bitter and short. That's not how it works, Commissioner. Officers make reports, not politicians. You leave the details to us. Derek leaned in, his eyes steady. Details officer, Maddox officer's safety doesn't permit you to strike a man holding a cup of coffee. And resisting doesn't mean standing still with open hands. His words landed like hammer strikes, slow and precise. Cole's smirk wavered, but he pushed back, scribbling harder on the report. He squared up. Aggressive stance. I neutralized a threat. Ryan's hand shook as he tried to echo it, pen scratching across the witness line. His eyes darted to Derek, then down again. Sweat traced his temple. The lie was heavier than his signature could hold. Officer Keller, Derek said quietly enough for Ryan to hear, enough for guilt to grow. The cameras don't care about your pen. They will speak louder than ink. Ask yourself if you want your career tied to a lie that won't survive the daylight. Ryan froze, pen tip, blotting a dark pool on the page. Cole slammed his fist on the table. Don't listen to him. He's manipulating you. We're writing the report the way it happened. No, Morales cut in, stepping forward. Her voice was flat, dangerous in its restraint. We're writing it the way it actually happened. I'll secure the body cams myself, and if either of you tries to delete so much as a second, you'll answer to me. Cole shot her a glare, but Morales didn't flinch. Her hand hovered near her radio, ready to call backup if she had to. The room tightened, air heavy with the weight of what was at stake. Every second ticked louder on the wall clock. Then Derek broke the silence, not with volume, but with certainty. This doesn't end in a report, he said, his tone cutting through the hum of the lights. It ends tonight. I'm convening an emergency disciplinary hearing before the day is out. The public will see exactly what happened here. The words landed like an earthquake. Duran, hovering just outside the door, froze mid-step. Ryan's pen clattered from his hand. Even Morales blinked, surprised at the speed of the move. Cole sat back, color draining from his face, as if the room itself had turned on him. The table wasn't just a table anymore. It was a stage. And the truth had just announced it wasn't waiting for morning. By nightfall, the municipal auditorium looked like a storm had parked over it. News vans lined the curb with their masts raised like bare trees. Camera lights pulsed against brick. A swell of voices rolled and broke at the doors. Reporters clustered near the steps, microphones ready, while neighbors who had watched the morning unfold pressed in shoulder to shoulder, faces set and tired, but hungry for a reckoning. Rosa stood near the front with her chin up and her phone still in her hand. Jamal hovered at her side, the live stream counter, a bright river on his screen. Inside, the hearing room had been assembled in a rush, but held the gravitas of a court. A long table, 3 chairs for the panel placards printed just minutes before. A projector humming with the impatience of truth waiting its turn. A clock on the back wall that clicked too loudly for anyone's comfort. The room filled fast, officers in uniform along the back wall, city attorneys, shuffling papers, a few community leaders sitting quietly in the first row like anchors. Derek entered without fanfare. No suit. Still the gray hoodie cleaned as best he could, the faint blot of coffee at the collar, a stubborn fact. He took his seat opposite the panel, placed his hands on the table, unrubbed wrists visible, and waited. Morales sat 2 seats down, posture straight, eyes steady, a witness who had prepared her courage like notes. Cole came in with a lawyer who wore a tie as a shield and a look that called everything theater. Ryan slipped in after them, small in the doorway, as if hoping the room might forget he was part of the cast. The chair of the panel, City Attorney Rowan Hale, called the room to order. Her voice carried the kind of fatigue that knows sleep won't help. This is an emergency disciplinary hearing concerning conduct at Maple and 3rd this morning, she said. We'll review all available footage and hear statements as needed. She nodded to an AV tech whose fingers hovered over the keyboard like a pianist's. The lights dipped. The screen behind the panel whispered to life. Then the street returned. First, the approach. The cruiser angling hard at the curb doors, flinging open, Cole striding into the frame with a certainty that looked worse when slowed. The camera froze Derek in a gray hoodie coffee and hand palm up. It rolled again. The slap landed with a crisp, sick sound the microphones did not miss. Someone in the room hissed air through their teeth. Another shifted in a chair with a squeak that felt like a wince. Then the shove practiced precise in the hood of the car, taking Derek's weight. The projector showed it twice, once in real time, and once at a speed that made the nuance unavoidable. Hands open, shoulders squared, no flinch forward, no step toward the officer, nothing that could be mistaken for a threat, except the fact of a black man in a hoodie occupying space he was entitled to. Pause, Rowan said. The freeze frame caught coffee mid-flight, a brown arc against gray fabric. She glanced to the panel, then to the room. Resume. Next came the words that had already lived all day online. Stop resisting. Over and over, pressed into the moment like a stamp that didn't fit the envelope. The body cam angle swung to Rosa in the bodega doorway. Her phone steady her mouth, forming the sentence the room now knew by heart. He's a customer. Every week. Another angle caught Jamal, the camera in his hands, trembling for 2 seconds, and then setting bravery, finding its sea legs. The footage shifted to the intake hallway camera. Derek moved past the desk, Morales behind him. Cole's jaw, a stiff rope of anger. Then the intake room, the badge case in Duran's hand. The paleness creeping into his face as if the lights had turned just on him. The audio picked up the first time it registered across the building, Deputy Commissioner Lawson. You could feel the room's temperature change at that. The word deputy always does something to air. When the screen went black, the projector fan kept spinning like it wanted to say more. For a breath, no one moved. Rowan let the silence sit a moment longer than comfort allowed. Truth needs time to land. Cole's lawyer stood first, smoothing his tie as if that could iron the moment flat. Let the record reflect, he began, that Officer Maddox faced a rapidly evolving situation with a non-compliant individual matching an active suspect description. Officer, safety considerations. Rowan raised a hand. We just watched the video, counselor. Her voice didn't lift, but the room returned to her. Your client will get his chance to speak. Briefly, Cole leaned toward the microphone with the energy of someone who believed sheer will could create a new past. If he just complied, he said, none of this would have happened. A wave moved through the seats, a soft chorus of disbelief, disgust, grief. Rosa's laugh was one dry syllable without humor. Jamal's camera found Cole's face and did not blink. Derek leaned toward his mic, not to match volume, but to cut through it. I complied, he said, crisp, and measured each word placed where it could not be misunderstood. I spoke. I stood still. I offered identification. None of that is a crime. The line was plain, but in that room it hit like a gavel. Heads nodded, shoulders released tension they didn't know they were holding. Rowan turned to Morales. Sergeant, your statement. Morales didn't shuffle papers. She didn't clear her throat. I arrived on scene after the initial contact, she said. I observed no articulable probable cause for a stop or detention. Force was used before any lawful basis was established. I secured the badge case, confirmed Deputy Commissioner Lawson's identity, and ordered that he be uncuffed. He chose to keep the cuffs on, so the record would be complete. She let that last clause rest in the room, not as a flourish, but as a fact that measured everyone present. Cole's lawyer started to object. Morales' eyes moved to him, and then passed him to the panel. I took custody of the body cam and dash footage immediately after, she added. Chain of evidence is intact. Rowan nodded once. Thank you, Sergeant. She looked to Ryan. Officer Keller Ryan's chair seemed to grow around him. He leaned into the mic, then back, then in again, like a swimmer bracing for cold water. His voice, when it arrived, belonged to someone older than he was. I retrieved a case from Mr. Lawson's pocket, he said, eyes fixed on the table. I should have opened it. I didn't. I dropped it. He swallowed. And I signed the witness line on Officer Maddox's draft. I was going to sign. His breath wavered. The word was a bridge he had to cross. But the footage, and what I saw, he wasn't resisting. His eyes found Derek for the first time, then fell away. I'm sorry, I was wrong. The room didn't cheer. It didn't gasp. It did something quieter and harder, it believed him. Not because he cried, though he blinked hard at tears he didn't want, but because the shape of the truth fit the shape of what the city had watched all day. Cole shifted a stiff, angry movement. This is a setup, he muttered into the mic, trying to find a plank to stand on. Politics. He baited us. He wanted this. Rowan's eyes cooled 2 degrees. Officer Maddox, consider your next words carefully. Derek kept his hands folded. I wanted the truth, he said simply. And for once, I wanted it to outlive the sidewalk. Rowan let out a breath she might have been holding since morning. She spoke to the room, but the city could have been the audience. The panel has heard enough to proceed with findings tonight. Additional review will continue, but the primary facts are not in dispute. She glanced at the screen now, blank but somehow still loud. We will recess for 20 minutes and return with interim decisions. She rapped the table lightly. People stood again. The low hum of conversation gathered relief, anger, a kind of tender outrage that only comes when a community has been asked too long to pretend it didn't see what it saw. Rosa made her way to the aisle, and without theatrics touched Derek's shoulder as she passed. It was not a thank you. It was not an apology. It was the human version of "we kept the camera steady." Jamal hovered, eyes wide, as if the room had taught him a new language he could already speak. At the back, through the glass, the press bristled with questions they'd ask later. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the doors, trying to hear the verdict before anyone said it. Cole sat rigid, lawyer whispering in his ear and finding no traction. Ryan stared at his hands as if they were a confession. Morales stayed seated, attention forward, a sentinel in a storm. The projector fan finally spun down. The room inhaled. When the panel returned, the lights seemed a touch brighter, or maybe it was the faces. Rowan took her seat and looked out over the room that had held its breath for a day. We'll deliver interim findings now, she said. But even before the words left her mouth, everyone knew which way the floor was tilting. The truth had already moved. The hearing, if anything, had simply followed it where it was going. The room held its breath when the panel returned. Cameras clicked softly, the whir of recorders filling the silence, like insects in tall grass. Rowan Hale adjusted her glasses, her face unreadable, though her voice carried the gravity of a decision that would ripple far beyond the walls. After review of all evidence and testimony, she began. This panel delivers the following findings. The first name struck like thunder. Officer Cole Maddox, terminated effective immediately. Your record will be forwarded to the State Post Commission for decertification. You will not wear this badge again. The air shifted, a mix of relief and the bitter crack of justice finally spoken. Cole's lawyer touched his arm, but Cole jerked it away, face-flushed eyes darting toward Derek with fury he could no longer disguise. For the first time, his silence outweighed his bluster. Rowan continued, steady as a gavel. Officer Ryan Keller, suspended without pay, mandatory retraining, probationary oversight. Retention contingent on demonstrable change under mentorship. This is not leniency. It is the last chance this department will grant you. Ryan nodded quickly, eyes glassy. His hands trembled, but this time it was relief mingled with shame, not fear. His whisper, "Thank you," was barely audible, but Derek heard it. Then Rowan's gaze moved to the side table, where Lieutenant Duran sat rigid. Lieutenant Frank Duran, demoted to sergeant for repeated failures of oversight and dismissal of prior warnings concerning Officer Maddox. Effective immediately. Duran's mouth opened, then shut again. The demotion landed harder than any shout could have. Years of climbing undone in a single sentence. He stared at his hands, unwilling to look at anyone. Rowan folded her notes and set them down. This concludes our findings. But Derek wasn't finished. He leaned into his microphone, voice calm yet edged with steel. Precinct 4 will undergo a full audit, body cam compliance, stop data complaint resolution timelines. Effective tonight, every unit will operate under one principle: every public contact is assumed to be transparent. Because it will be. The words landed like stone in water, sending ripples through the room. Officers shifted uneasily in their seats. Reporters scribbled. Community members leaned forward, eyes wide. Derek's voice rose, not in anger but in clarity. I don't need apologies. I need accuracy. I don't need promises. I need the record to match reality. This department belongs to the people of Rivergate, not the fear of its officers. The finality in his tone settled over the room like a closing door. For Rosa, it was vindication. For Jamal, a lesson carved in stone. For Ryan, a chance at redemption. For Cole, the end of a career built on arrogance. And for everyone watching inside and out, it was proof that truth had found its way into daylight, and this time it wasn't leaving quietly. 3 days later, the auditorium at Rivergate High was filled to the rafters. Folding chairs creaked beneath the weight of neighbors, parents, students, and elders who had carried the story on their lips all week. The stage was plain just a microphone and a wooden podium that looked too small for the size of the truth about to be spoken. It was Jamal who stepped up first. His hands were small but steady as he plugged his phone into the projector. The screen lit up with the same shaky footage he had captured, the slap, the spill of coffee, the echoing words, "Stop resisting." When the video ended, silence lingered before applause erupted, not for what had happened, but for the courage of a boy who refused to look away. Jamal sat down, his cheeks red, but his chin lifted high. Next came a nurse named Angela, her voice worn from night shifts but strong with memory. She told of an officer who once walked a patient through the chaos of a breakdown, calm words where cuffs might have been. "Those moments exist too," she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd, "and they deserve to be just as loud as the moments that shame us." Heads nodded, some with tears, because it was true. Justice wasn't about painting all cops with the same brush, but demanding that the right strokes define the canvas. Rosa Alvarez took the microphone, her hands trembling only for a second before she steadied them on the wood. Her words cut through the room like church bells. "We are not against the police. We are against needless pain. We are against silence when it is easier to look away." The crowd rose in applause, the sound like rain, hammering on rooftops, relentless cleansing. At last, Derek Lawson stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone quieted the hall. "Titles come and go," he said, his tone even almost gentle. "But no one needs a badge, a rank, or an office to deserve dignity. That belongs to you the moment you're born, and no one has the right to take it." His words settled into the walls, into the hearts of everyone seated there, like stones laid into a foundation. The final scene was simple, almost ordinary. Morning sunlight spread across Maple and 3rd as Derek walked into Rosa's store once again. Hoodie zipped, the stain long washed away. Rosa poured his coffee with a smile that carried both apology and pride. Jamal, leaning on the counter, looked up at him and asked, "Aren't you afraid after everything?" Derek smiled, soft and steady. "I don't walk these streets to prove I'm strong," he said. "I walk them so the ones who come after me don't have to be afraid at all." And with that, he stepped back into the day, hoodie, coffee, and dignity intact, leaving behind a lesson that lingered long after the words were gone. Justice isn't about erasing fear, but making sure it never rules again. And that's the heart of this story. It reminds us that dignity is not a privilege, it's a right every human being deserves. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about making sure no one has to walk in fear tomorrow. If this story moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay connected with more meaningful stories here on Mr. Max Stories. Your support means more than you know. It gives our team the strength to keep creating content that inspires, challenges, and uplifts. Let Mr. Max Stories always be your symbol of justice, told through the power of storytelling.